Is unbelievable. As when we were here Friday night, and the Filipino flags, I had never seen so many in one place, and just the enthusiasm and the pride is so palpable amongst my fellow Filipino Canadians here, and they are coming out in droves. And what I said to my husband,
what Hazel is describing here is bigger than simply being excited about a tennis player, because she's talking about something that usually takes generations to build. A young Filipino kid watching tennis today doesn't have to imagine whether someone from their background can reach the highest level. They've just seen Alex Eala do it, and that's a massive difference. For years, Filipino sports culture had obvious heroes in other sports. Boxing had Manny Pacquiao. Basketball has always had an enormous following, but tennis never had that same figure at the very top of the sport. Now there is one. And that's why the reaction in Toronto feels different from an ordinary player getting support from her home country. People aren't only showing up because Alex is winning. They're showing up because her success gives the community something they can actually see themselves inside. That's why the flags matter. That's why families are bringing their children. And that's why Hazel gets emotional talking about it. Because the real impact of Alex Eala isn't limited to the matches she's winning right now. It is the possibility that somewhere in that Toronto crowd, a young Filipino kid is watching her and thinking, I could do that too.
Filipino boys and girls out there that can now see that it's possible to be a world-class tennis player and to, have the flag of Canada and the Philippines to share that love and to be here in Toronto is just mind-blowing to me.
And this is the part that makes the Alex Eala phenomenon even more interesting. The people in this discussion aren't saying Filipino fans are simply supporting their own player. They're describing something much bigger. New people are entering tennis because of Alex. That's a completely different kind of influence. A normal tennis star can bring existing fans to a stadium. Alex appears to be bringing people who weren't necessarily tennis fans in the first place. That's why the Toronto atmosphere has become such a story. The Filipino community isn't just filling seats. They're turning up together, waving flags, bringing their families, learning the players, following the tournament, and creating an atmosphere that other people inside the stadium can feel. And then there's an even more interesting part of the conversation. The panel talks about young people growing up wanting to become the next Alex. That is how sports icons are actually created, not when commentators decide someone is a star. Not when a marketing department puts their face on a poster. It happens when a kid watches someone and suddenly sees a possible future for themselves. Alex Eala is only 21. So the most important part of her influence may not even be what she's doing to tennis right now. It may be the players who haven't picked up a racket yet, because if even a fraction of those kids become serious tennis players after watching Alex, then what we're seeing in Toronto isn't just a fan phenomenon. It's the beginning of a tennis culture that didn't exist before her.
Somebody manageable. They are not drawing somebody manageable. They are drawing the DC Open champion in the form of her life with 7 top 10 wins this season and absolutely no fear of anybody in this building.
Part 3. What Layla is describing is a very different level of respect. She's not talking about Alex as a promising young player. She's talking about what happens inside the draw when players see her name. And that distinction matters. Because rankings tell you where a player has been. The draw tells you who you might have to face. And according to what Layla is describing, players are no longer looking at Alex's ranking first. They're looking at the problem she creates. Think about what Alex just did in Washington. She didn't beat one dangerous player and have a good week. She went through Leylah Fernandez, Elina Svitolina, Naomi Osaka, and Jessica Pegula. Different styles, different strengths, different tactical problems. And Alex kept finding answers. That's why the idea of nobody wants her in their half is so powerful. The fear isn't necessarily that Alex is going to overpower every opponent from the first ball. It's that giving her time to understand your game can become a problem. You show her what works. She studies it. Then she starts taking it away. And by the time the match reaches the critical stages, you're no longer playing against the same tactical problem you prepared for. That's the part that can make a player uncomfortable before the match even begins. Because you can prepare for a big serve. You can prepare for a heavy forehand. You can prepare for a left-hander. But how do you prepare for someone whose biggest weapon is figuring you out? That is what makes Layla's comments so interesting. She's not describing Alex's reputation from the outside. She's describing how Alex's presence is changing the way players think about the draw. And once opponents start checking the bracket specifically to see where Alex landed, the ranking becomes only part of the story.
Flags out, talk to them. They got their chicken adobo, which is making a lot of news.
I wanted to ask her about that tonight, but I just didn't feel it felt right. I think we kept the conversation on tennis, but I was desperate to ask her if she's tried Chef Ash.
Chef
Ash's chicken adobo, and if she has, does it compare? I really wanted to know, but it didn't feel like the night. Maybe we'll ask her later in the tournament.
Another night. There is another night.
There is
because
another night.
she is on to the round.
What this discussion is really giving us is a much stronger angle than simply saying Alex has passionate fans. The hosts are pointing to three viral factors at once: Alex's Filipino fan base, the physical energy it creates inside the stadium, and the fact that the support is becoming part of her competitive advantage. They specifically bring up Jimmy Connor's observation that a fan base like Alex's can give a player an extra push when the match gets difficult. And that matters even more after what happened against McNally, when Alex was dealing with an ankle problem and still fought through a 3-set battle. But then they reveal something bigger. Fans aren't just coming from Toronto. They're driving across Canada to watch her. One group even traveled down from Ottawa carrying Filipino flags, turning what should have been another tournament session into something that feels almost like a home event. And Alex herself has already explained why this connection feels different. When asked what it was like playing in front of such huge crowds, she didn't make the answer about fame. She corrected the question, what's it like being Filipino? That one response explains why this phenomenon keeps following her from Washington to Toronto, because Alex isn't simply giving Filipino fans someone to cheer for. She's giving them someone who makes them feel represented on one of tennis's biggest stages. And now the rest of the tennis world is starting to notice just how powerful that connection has become.
Is it for Alex Eala? Well, obviously, her star is rising. Now 20 in the world, just coming off her first WTA title. And now she gets to share the court with Venus Williams?
Yeah, unbelievable. I mean, and the crowds that both of them bring, having that energy at these tournaments, I mean, you can't put a price on it.
$17.32.
Well, for the men's.
That's right.
It would have been a lot more expensive for
Way
Alex
more.
Eala and Venus Williams. The stock was a lot higher on the women's side.
$1,734 to get in there, maybe.
What makes this discussion interesting is that the people around the sport are not talking about Alex Eala as just another young player having a good tournament. They are talking about the effect she is having on the entire event. Danielle and Stevie first point out the obvious competitive factor. Alex is coming into this match with enormous momentum, while Katie McNally has just beaten the reigning Wimbledon champion. So on paper, this should be a fascinating tennis matchup. But then the conversation shifts to something much bigger, the Alex Eala effect. They openly acknowledge that the demand changes when Alex plays. The stadium is packed, tickets are disappearing. And the tournament has even introduced Filipino food specifically because of the fans surrounding her. That is an extraordinary detail. A tournament doesn't normally change its food offering because one player is attracting attention. But here, the organizers are responding to an audience that has arrived in numbers large enough to change the atmosphere around the entire event. And the hosts make another important observation. The impact isn't staying inside Alex's match. They talk about seeing packed courts around the grounds before Alex had even started playing. Fans were already inside the tournament, moving from court to court, waiting for her appearance. That means Alex's popularity is creating activity beyond her own court. And then they compare the phenomenon with famous fan bases from men's tennis. Brazilian fans around Guga Quarton, South American crowds around Marcelo Rios, and other international stars who turn tournaments into something resembling a home event. But there is a crucial difference here. Alex is doing this while her story is still being written. She isn't a decades-established legend whose fan base was built over years. She's a young player who has suddenly created this level of attention. And the analysts are openly asking how McNally will handle the mania surrounding Alex before the match even begins. That may be the most revealing part of the entire discussion, because when experienced tennis analysts start discussing the crowd, the ticket demand, the food, the packed grounds, and the psychological effect on Alex's opponent, all before focusing on the tennis itself, you know something unusual is happening. Alex Eala isn't simply becoming a bigger player, she's becoming an event.